This was my property line, a simple, invisible line in the grass separating my little piece of the world from my neighbor's. And this is the garage my neighbor decided to build on it. When I pointed it out, she told me to do something about it.
So I did. But to really get how we ended up with demolition crews and court orders, to understand how a fight over a few feet of dirt spiraled completely out of control, we have to go back.
Back to when this was all just a quiet patch of grass between two houses, before the concrete was poured and the battle lines were drawn.
For 5 years, this house has been my sanctuary. It's where I poured every penny I'd saved, the place I planned to put down roots, and maybe, one day, watch my own kids play in the yard.
It's a modest little place in a quiet neighborhood where people wave when they get the mail and mostly keep to themselves. My property isn't huge, but it's 9.
The backyard is where I have my morning coffee, where I've tried and failed to grow tomatoes 3 years running, and where my dog, Buster, wages a fruitless, lifelong war against the local squirrels. The boundary between my place and my neighbor's, let's call her Karen, was never something I thought about. It just was. An unspoken line where my mowed lawn ended and her slightly overgrown one began.
We weren't really friends. We were just neighbors. We'd make small talk about the weather. The most dramatic our relationship ever got was when her cat decided my prize-winning rosebush was its personal toilet.
A minor annoyance solved with a polite chat, or so I thought. That's the kind of neighborhood it was. Quiet, predictable, peaceful. I loved that peace. I had no idea how fragile it was, or that it was about to be shattered by the sound of heavy machinery and an unbelievable amount of entitlement. It all started on a Tuesday morning. I'm in the kitchen making coffee when I hear the unmistakable rumble of a huge truck. I peek out the window and see a cement mixer backing into Karen's driveway. I didn't think much of it. She'd mentioned wanting a new patio a few months back. I went about my day, worked from home, and forgot about it. It wasn't until I took Buster out that afternoon that I felt that first lurch in my stomach. There, on the side of her house, were wooden forms laid out, mapping out a big rectangle. Looked like the foundation for a garage, but something was off. Terribly off. The rectangle wasn't just on her property. It stretched deep into mine. At first, I thought my eyes were messing with me. I walked to the edge of my lawn, my heart starting to pound. From where I stood, it looked like at least 10 feet of the foundation was sitting squarely on my side of the line. I just stood there in disbelief. This had to be a mistake, a massive, glaring one, but a mistake. Nobody intentionally builds a permanent structure on someone else's land, right? That's the kind of crazy story you read about online. The wooden forms were a stark violation of the quiet, unwritten rules of our neighborhood. Buster, sensing my stress, started whining and nudged my hand. I told myself it was a simple mix-up. The crew must have misread the plans. Karen probably had no idea. I'd just go over, point it out, we'd have a slightly awkward laugh, and they'd move the forms.
Simple problem, simple solution. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the knot of dread in my gut, and decided to wait for Karen to get home. It was just a misunderstanding. It had to be. That evening, I saw Karen's car pull in. I grabbed the plot plan I got when I bought my house, the official paper showing the exact legal boundaries, and walked over, telling myself to stay calm and friendly. "Hey, Karen," I started, trying to sound casual. "Looks like you've got a big project going on." She got out of her car, beaming. "Oh, it's going to be fantastic. A brand new 2-car garage. I'm so excited. No more parking on the street in winter." I took a breath. "That's great. There's just one little thing. I think there might be a mistake with the placement." I pointed at the wooden forms. "It looks like it's coming over onto my property by a fair bit." Her smile froze, just a little. "Oh, I don't think so. The builders know what they're doing." "I'm pretty sure it is," I said, keeping my voice gentle. "I brought my plot plan to show you." I unfolded the map and pointed to the clear black line. "See? Your property ends right here. The forms go about 10 feet past that."
She glanced at the paper for half a second before waving it away. "Those old papers are never accurate. My husband and I always knew the line went up to that big oak tree over there." The oak tree? The oak tree was a good 15 feet inside my yard. I was speechless.
She was claiming a huge chunk of my land based on a feeling? Karen, that's not the property line, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. This is the legal document from the county. Well, the county is wrong, she shot back, her tone suddenly defiant. This is where the line is. It's where it's always been.
The conversation was a dead end. She was completely convinced her feelings were more important than legal documents. It was my first taste of the unshakable entitlement I was dealing with. I went back home feeling sick. This wasn't a simple mistake. This was deliberate. The next morning, they poured the concrete.
Seeing that wet, gray slab hardening on my land felt like a punch to the gut. The wooden forms were one thing. This was permanent. This was an invasion. I knew then I couldn't let it go. My next call was to a professional land surveyor. A few days later, the surveyor came out with his high-tech gear.
After a few hours of measuring, he planted small wooden stakes in the ground, each one topped with a bright pink ribbon. These stakes marked the exact, legally indisputable property line. And what do you know? One of the stakes was planted right in the middle of Karen's new concrete slab. 10 feet of her foundation was, without a shadow of a doubt, on my property. The surveyor just shook his head and muttered, "Wow, that's a bold one. You're telling me." But now I had the ultimate receipt. The proof was literally staked into the ground. I took dozens of pictures. I had the official survey report. Armed with this, I felt a surge of confidence. There was no way she could argue now. This time, things would be different. With the surveyor's report in my hand and pink ribbons in the ground, I walked back over to Karen's. She was outside, admiring the concrete slab like it was a work of art. "Karen," I said, my voice firm but civil, "I had a professional survey done." I pointed to the stake in her foundation. "As you can see, your garage is 10 feet onto my property. This is the legal boundary, confirmed this morning." She looked at the stake, she looked at me, and then she laughed. Not a chuckle, a full-throated, condescending laugh. "Oh, that's just adorable," she sneered. "You went and spent all that money on a surveyor? Honey, I told you, this is my land." My jaw hit the floor. I'm holding a legal document. A professional marker is right at her feet, and she's still denying it? It was like arguing with someone who insists the sky is green. "This isn't an opinion, Karen," I said, my patience gone. "This is a legal fact. You have built on my property. It's called encroachment. You need to stop construction and remove it." And that's when everything changed. She stepped closer, her face a mask of smug fury. "Listen to me," she said, her voice low and menacing. "I have a permit from the city to build this garage. It's all approved." She jabbed a finger at the slab. "This garage is staying right where it is. It's on my land, and there's nothing you can do about it. So why don't you go back to your little house and mind your own business?" Then came the words that sealed her fate. She leaned in, a nasty smirk on her face, and said, "And if you think you can stop me, go ahead. I dare you. Do something about it." That was it. The dare. She wasn't just wrong. She was arrogant. She was a bully who thought she could just take what she wanted. She thought I'd back down. She had no idea who she was messing with. As I walked back to my house, the anger in my mind was cold and clear. She wanted me to do something about it. Fine. Challenge accepted. The friendly neighbor approach was officially dead. Karen had made it clear she didn't care about reason or evidence. She dared me to act, so I was going to act. By the book. My first call was to a real estate attorney. I sat in his office the next day with a folder full of evidence. My deed,
the plot plan, the new survey, and notes on every conversation with Karen. I laid out the whole story. When I finished, the lawyer leaned back. "Well," he said, "this is a textbook case of property encroachment, a really blatant one." He explained that her building permit let her build a garage, but it absolutely did not give her the right to build it on my land. He laid out the plan. First, a formal cease and desist letter sent via certified mail, so we'd have proof she got it. The letter would demand all construction stop immediately and that she remove the structure. It was the legal warning shot. If she ignored it, we'd sue. We sent the letter, and the waiting began. A week later, the mail receipt came back signed, and what happened at her property? A framing crew showed up and started putting up walls. She was actively ignoring a legal notice from a lawyer. She was calling my bluff. My lawyer wasn't surprised. "Some people have to learn the hard way," he said. Our next step was filing a lawsuit and asking a judge for an injunction, a court order to force her to stop. It was expensive, but she'd left me no choice. Her defiance was almost comical. The legal system is slow. Weeks turned into a month, then 2. All the while, her garage kept growing. Walls, a roof, even windows went in. It was a fully formed building, sitting illegally on my land. She'd see me in the yard and give me this smug little wave, like she'd already won. She probably thought that by building it so fast, a judge wouldn't want to order a nearly finished building to be torn down. It's a tactic, but she'd made a huge mistake. Her bad faith was on record. She'd been warned nicely. She'd been shown a survey. She'd been sent a cease and desist. The courts don't like it when you brazenly ignore all of that. Finally, our court date for the injunction arrived. Karen was there with her lawyer, looking totally confident. Her lawyer argued the boundary was unclear and tearing it down would be a financial hardship. Then my lawyer stood up. He calmly presented the evidence, the survey, the photos, the certified mail receipt, and pictures of all the construction that happened after she got the letter. The judge was not impressed with Karen. He looked over everything, then looked right at her and granted the injunction, ordering all work to stop. But he went further. He said that unless she could produce a valid survey that proved ours wrong, he would be ordering the removal of the garage at her expense. The look on Karen's face was priceless. The confidence just drained away, replaced by pale, slack-jawed shock. The final court date was basically a formality. Karen's lawyer had nothing. The judge's ruling was swift and final. Karen had 30 days to remove the part of the garage on my property. If she didn't, I could hire someone to do it and send her the bill. We waited. A week went by. Nothing. 2 weeks. Crickets. She was going to drag this out to the very last second. On day 29, my lawyer sent her one last notice. A demolition crew was scheduled for 8 a.m. the next morning. I barely slept. I was a bundle of nerves and a weird, giddy excitement. This was about standing up to a bully who thought the rules didn't apply to her. The next morning, at 7:55 a.m., a large flatbed truck rumbled down my street, carrying a beautiful, bright yellow excavator. It was the most glorious thing I had ever seen. Karen came storming out of her house, screaming at the crew foreman. The foreman, a guy who looked like he'd seen it all, just calmly took a sip from his thermos and showed her the court order. He pointed to my property line, then to the excavator. "Ma'am," he said, "my job today is to remove everything on that side of the line. You can watch from your porch, or the police can give you a ride downtown. Your choice." Defeated, she stalked back to her house to fume. Then the excavator roared to life. The operator was an artist. He positioned the bucket right at the property line and slammed it into the side of the garage. The sound of splintering wood was music to my ears. Piece by piece, the machine tore into the building. It ripped off the roof, crunched through the walls, and smashed the windows. Within an hour, the part of the garage that had stood so defiantly on my land was just a pile of rubble. The crew was careful to keep all the debris on my side, which they would clean up later.
What was left on her property was a bizarre, sliced-in-half building, a monument to her own arrogance. I didn't gloat. I didn't cheer. I just stood at my window, sipped my coffee, and watched justice being served.
She told me to do something about it, and I did. This whole thing was one of the most stressful experiences of my life, but it taught me a huge lesson about standing your ground. It turns out a lot of people have their own nightmare neighbor stories. So, what's yours?
Have you ever had a fight over a property line or dealt with a neighbor who thought the rules didn't apply to them? Drop a comment below and share your story. And if you want more content like this, make sure to subscribe. In the days that followed, the demo crew cleaned up every last splinter.
My yard was torn up, but it was my yard again. The invisible line had been made very, very visible. Karen's half a garage stood there for weeks. Eventually, I guess the city leaned on her, and she had the rest of it torn down. We don't talk anymore. No more small talk about the weather.
Now, when we see each other, she just glares. An invisible wall, far more permanent than her garage, now stands between our two properties. Looking back, I don't regret it. I tried being reasonable. I tried being neighborly. But when someone meets facts with delusion, your only option is to stand firm. I didn't want this fight, but I'm glad I fought it. Because owning a home is about having a place in the world that is unequivocally yours. And sometimes you have to fit